Your higher self speaks demandingly, but it doesn't speak abusively. And there's a big difference between the two. In this video, I want to share with you why Friedrich Nietzsche said that people fear their higher self. And I'm going to share with you what Abraham Maslow proposed as the most straightforward step to start developing a closer connection with your true and higher self. Now, Nietzsche said that people fear their higher self because when it speaks demandingly. And then I'm adding, however, it doesn't speak abusively. Why am I adding this? Because if we just focus on the fact that our higher self speaks demandingly, we can start mixing up our higher self and our inner critic. So allow me to explain all of this. What did Nietzsche mean when he said that our higher self speaks demandingly and therefore we fear it? Well, he talked about the fact that the higher self that speaks to you, that he believed we have, this inner voice that is pulling you or pushing you towards greatness, that voice asks of you to do the things and engage in things and show up in the world in a way that will cause a lot of discomfort, in a way that entails taking risks. After all, Nietzsche was the one who said, live dangerously. That's the secret to a fulfilling, meaningful, fruitful life. So your higher self doesn't say, it's okay, chill today. It's okay, don't say that thing that you know is true and you believe strongly is the right thing to say, but don't say it to not upset anyone or to not be looked at in a weird way. Your higher self doesn't say, oh, don't stick out. Your higher self says, put in the work, put in the effort. Wake up earlier than is comfortable so that you can pursue your dreams. Say that thing that is on your mind that you strongly believe in, even if you will be even maybe ostracized, even if you will be left out of the friend group. But your higher self doesn't say you're a piece of shit for waking up too late. Pardon my language. That's the difference that we are talking about. It speaks demandingly, but not abusively. It asks of you to show up in the world, to show up for yourself, to continue showing up as your most authentic self, which is exhausting. Let's be clear about it. It's not just about the physical effort of waking up at 5 a.m. and working out and reading, doing ice baths. It's not necessarily that your higher self is asking you to engage in the most generic self-improvement routine. Your higher self is asking you to be authentic. Maybe your higher self is asking you to pursue a career path that is less respected, but you deeply know that it is something where you can actualize your natural tendencies. You deeply know that's a path where you can bring value to the world, even though your family will not be thrilled, or maybe they will be outraged that you're pursuing that path. That is often what the higher self asks of you. It asks of you to show up authentically in the world. And to show up authentically in the world is almost always causing some discomfort. And therefore it is exhausting. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm just trying to paint it as it is. Showing up day after day after day authentically in the world can get pretty exhausting. That doesn't mean that we don't develop endurance because of the meaning in showing up authentically. But it is for a reason why we fear the demanding voice of the higher self. But now, to go back to my addition, it doesn't speak abusively. If we just focus on the higher self speaking demandingly, then when you fall in loops of shame, When you are saying to yourself, you're a loser or a failure or a piece of shit, pardon my language once again, for not doing something, not completing something in a given time frame, failing to reach a certain goal, all things that objectively it would have been great if you did accomplish in a given time frame, accomplish in general, if you succeeded. However, it's not just that you're recognizing objectively it would have been better if I have done this. You are bashing yourself. It's not constructive self-criticism, it's self-shaming and self-judgment. So if we focus on just the demanding quality of the voice of the higher self, we can start thinking that, okay, when I'm judging myself strongly, that is the higher self. That's the higher self trying to punish me. Well, the higher self is not supposed to punish you. It is supposed to call you out. It is supposed to wake you up. It is supposed to create some discomfort. Because why would you feel good about not showing up for yourself? But there is a difference between a certain level of discomfort needed to wake you up and prompt you into action versus discomfort created by vicious self-shaming and self-judgment. So what I want to point out to you is to acknowledge the voice of the higher self, because it does exist. Now, I'm not going to throw any studies your way. We are here talking about topics that cannot be confirmed through empirical experiments or through empirical means of validating certain theories. I am a proponent of a belief that we do have a true, authentic self that is the higher self. Maslow is another thinker who talks about this, and he is even more straightforward. Nietzsche is very ambiguous. There's so much debate on what Nietzsche thought about the concept of the self, but Nietzsche also valued ideas that prompt us towards a certain healthy, vigorous way of life, regardless of whether we can prove them, and even regardless of whether he believed them to be ultimately true. So in Nietzsche's case, it's not important what he thought about the concept of the self, but he is saying the higher self speaks demandingly and we fear it, and he's asking you to respond to your higher self, to not try to run away from your higher self. Maslow is more straightforward. Maslow is more clear. He believes that you have a true, authentic self, which is at the same time your higher self. Because Maslow believed that the true nature, the true human nature, is the higher nature. He believed that all humans, or almost all humans, have inherent drive towards goodness and greatness. Not greatness in the sense of going over others to succeed, not greatness in the sense of stepping over others and abusing others for your own success. Maslow was very clear on the concept of human goodness and greatness. Therefore, your higher self cannot prompt you to deceive others for your own gain and success and improvement. Your higher self cannot lead you to take advantage of others and abuse others and cause harm to others on the way towards your success. Let's be clear about it. Well, because Maslow is talking about true self, authentic self, and the higher self being pretty much one and the same, Maslow has some similarities in what Nietzsche was talking about, the demanding voice. Maslow considered it very normal and human that you hesitate to follow the voice of the higher self. Also, just like Nietzsche, because he understood how much discomfort, how much risk, how many challenges this entails. But Maslow points us to start with recognizing the authentic voice, recognizing who we are. And he called this inner signals of the authentic true self, which by nurturing our relationship with, we go closer and closer to being the type of person who responds and follows the higher self. And he talked about this example that he shared with his students, or he would often share with his students through multiple generations, where he said, when you go to a party, you take a sip of wine, not paying attention to the label on the bottle. And now, let me just insert my own note here. I am not advising anyone to drink alcohol. Some people listening to this are strongly against alcohol. Some people are trying to quit. Some people enjoy it on somewhat frequent basis. I'm not going to advise you to actually go and drink wine. You can do this with any other beverage. Okay, but Maslow said, drink a glass of wine, don't look at the label on the bottle, and develop your own opinion of it. Because he said one of the most straightforward examples how we dismiss our true authentic self is in social events when we assume the attitude and opinion of others. And he shared the example of himself when he was offered an expensive scotch or whiskey, and he saw that it was expensive by the bottle, and someone poured him a glass, and he drank a sip, and he said, what a wonderful scotch. And immediately he realized, well, I don't know anything about scotch or whiskey, whatever the drink was. I don't know anything about it. Why would I say that it was great? It was because of the expensive bottle. And you might think, well, that doesn't matter. It does matter, because these small moments of authenticity or inauthenticity are building our relationship with our true authentic self and then our higher self. So all of these small moments, whether it's a drink or a movie or a book or any moment or experience, you're always faced with a choice. Am I going to develop and nurture and listen to my own voice and opinion? Or am I going to switch to autopilot and be led by the opinions of others, be led by the common narrative, the widely accepted narrative? So this is not to encourage you to always be a contrarian. This is not to encourage you to become neurotic about never agreeing with the majority. That's also inauthentic. If you're actively trying to always find an opinion that is different from the majority, that's inauthentic because you're still responding to the majority. So this doesn't have to do with how much of a rebel and renegade you are when it comes to your opinions on music, art, film, food, culture. Because for some people, listening to their true self will relatively often, or more often than not, lead them to agree with what is the thing that is respected, popular, well-liked, whatever. So the focus shouldn't be on becoming a contrarian. The focus should be on having a pause between an experience and our judgment of that experience, or our assessment of that experience. Again, social events, books, movies, music, culture, and then that translates to how you relate to other people, which is a way more complex thing than reading a book. As much as I'm a lover of literature and philosophy and psychology, interacting with a person is infinitely more complex. So we go from knowing whether we like cucumbers or not. I think Maslow was talking about radish. He said if you want to nurture your true self, you must know if you like reddish or not. You must know what type of shoes fit you well. Imagine that statement by one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century. You know, it's not always digging into the deepest layers of our psyche. Sometimes it is nurturing that relation with ourselves in how we operate in the world. What suits me, what doesn't suit me. I can tell you that for me this was immensely beneficial when I realized, okay, certain climate doesn't suit me. Certain environments don't suit me. I'm sensitive to certain external stimuli, and it's okay that I'm sensitive, but I'm more resilient when it comes to this. Here are certain sounds that I cannot stand. That doesn't mean that I'm going to be spoiled, that I'm in certain situations going to ruin everyone's time if I'm exposed to certain stimuli that I don't like. But I know how to lead myself through life to honor what my preferences are. So I highly advise you, to start with this idea of drinking a beverage when you're given a chance without looking at the bottle. And just pause, do I like it? Also, watching a movie. Maslow said, go watch a movie and try to develop your opinion without hearing the opinions of others. First develop your opinion, then interact with others. Again, not for the sake of becoming a contrarian, but for the sake of listening to the inner voice. Now, the one thing is left to address is the question, what if I don't hear any inner voice? Well, the first initial response would be, maybe that's an excuse. Maybe that's an excuse because it's easier to say, I don't hear my inner voice, than to say, I fear the demands of my inner voice. But let's say you really don't hear it. The same starting point. Doesn't have to be a grand step. So you don't have to sell all of your belongings and go to Nepal or Bali to climb a mountain or a volcano and do this or that ceremony. That is not necessary or needed for you to develop a closer connection to your true self. Go interact with the world and pause before taking in the opinions and judgments and assessments of others. By doing this on a daily basis and weekly basis, you reignite the inner voice, or rather, because Maslow would argue the inner voice is always there, you reignite your ability to listen to it clearly. Then, what you cannot do is ignore it. Because if you ignore it, then we are back at the point of supposedly not hearing it. We have to respond to it, we have to follow it when it demands something of us, in terms of having, taking certain action, or hearing pretty clearly that you shouldn't avoid that task, you shouldn't avoid speaking to that person, you shouldn't avoid setting boundaries, okay? I know a lot of you can relate to this. So if you don't ignore and dismiss your inner voice asking you to set boundaries, have a conversation, send a text message, engage in a task, express your opinion, if you don't dismiss and ignore your inner voice, if you follow this, the relationship grows stronger, the voice becomes louder and clearer, and then we are talking about those insights from the higher self where maybe you are guided towards a certain path, maybe you're guided towards a certain mission, you're guided to understand what a certain person means for your life, or how a certain person has been or is damaging your life. But it starts with these smallest daily insights and daily opportunities to communicate with your true and higher self. So once again, friends, the higher self speaks demandingly because it asks you to show up in the world authentically, but it never speaks in an abusive tone. So practice separating the true higher self from the inner critic. And to develop this relationship and to hear this voice more clearly, take these daily small opportunities to pause and develop your own opinion of a situation or something that you consumed before taking in the opinions of others. I'm hoping you find this helpful. Let me know in the comments if this is something you thought about, if this is something that you're interested in hearing about more, because Maslow wrote a ton about this. Nietzsche, not so much. Again, he was more ambiguous, but there are still more things to extract from Nietzsche as well. However, Maslow was more systematic when it comes to this particular topic. So let me know if you want to hear more. And as always, stay strong, love life, never feel sorry for yourself. Know that there is a true self, and your true self is your higher self. Light that raging fire in your heart, and always go beyond. Thank you.